Welcome back to the AI Daily Brief. Today we've got an interesting topic. On the one hand, we're covering a new AI-related backlash at YouTube after the company started implementing AI in ways that they weren't exactly clear about, angering a number of creators. But we're pairing that with some new rules of the road from Netflix around Gen AI and asking broadly what company strategy should be when it comes to AI in media. Now, I think background context for all of this is that we are in this interesting and frankly sort of weird moment, where on the one hand, we are seeing in general a lot more AI backlash. This has been present ever since the beginning of ChatGPT, but it's one of those summer moments where it gets a little bit louder and where the critics are jumping on a few recent happenings to really amp up the anti-AI narrative. At the same time, when you go and spend time with anyone in sort of normal society, normal work, normal youth, normal school, AI has just so quickly become ubiquitous and commonplace that it takes a lot of the heft, frankly, out of some of those critiques. No one who's interacted with AI or uses ChatGPT needs to be sold on how powerful and useful this technology is. And in that context, the conversation necessarily shifts away from whether this is going to be a thing and more how we do it well. And today we're getting into a couple different instances of how to do it well, or perhaps how not to do it well. Over the last few days, on all of the big social networks, i.e. X, Threads, etc., a ton of posts started to come up like this one from Kiwi Sagas. PSA for artists on YouTube. YouTube appears to be using AI to upscale your content and generate higher definition videos on their platform. They continue, the left images are my original upload on TikTok and the right is YouTube's version of the same content. You can even see the AI errors. Now, by the way, if you are not watching this, it's probably a little bit better watching the video on either YouTube or Spotify. But basically, we've got two images from this creator. The first in each case is a little lower fidelity, a little more blurry, and then the second is a much crisper image. Now, it would be one thing if it was just a perfect improvement in the sense of higher resolution, but this is AI, and that means there can be weird artifacts, and as you can see in the second image, it's not ultimately exactly the same. It's a little bit different. Jamrock Hobo writes, looks like we can't showcase artwork on YouTube Shorts anymore without it being automatically subjected to a horrible AI sharpener. The website is conditioning users to let actual AI content go unnoticed. Once again, we have the same thing, where you see a piece of art, and then an artificially AI-enhanced version of it. Pretend Mirrors writes, YouTube is applying post-processing to all shorts so they look more like AI. This is intentional and malicious. When their generative AI Shorts feature launches, users will be less likely to discern what's AI slop and what's not, and the audience will think AI video is just as good. So what we have here is an introduction of the concern. It's not just that creators are annoyed about YouTube doing this without their permission, it's that they think that it's going to train people basically to not be able to tell the difference between AI generations and human-generated videos, with a host of attendant consequences. Sam Abarime writes, please be aware of what's going on. If everything starts to look a little off and a little fake, it's much easier for bad actors to not only push through actual disinformation, but also attempt to discredit factual video sources. Again, reinforcing this idea that the problem is not just the permissions, but instead that closing the gap between AI and non-AI video has consequences when it comes to mis and disinformation. Over the weekend, numerous outlets picked up the story, including the BBC, who wrote a piece called YouTube secretly used AI to edit people's videos. The results could bend reality. The central question in the piece, as expressed in the subhead, as AI quietly mediates our world, what happens to our shared connection with real life? The BBC writes, in recent months, YouTube has secretly used AI to tweak people's videos without letting them know or asking permission. Wrinkles in shirts seem more defined. Skin is sharper in some places and smoother in others. Pay close attention to ears and you may notice them warp. These changes are small, barely visible without a side-by-side comparison, yet some disturbed YouTubers say it gives their content a subtle and unwelcome AI-generated feeling. There's a larger trend at play. A growing share of reality is pre-processed by AI before it reaches us. Eventually, the question won't be whether you can tell the difference, but whether it's eroding our ties to the world around us. It got enough buzz that YouTube had to respond. The Team YouTube account wrote, we hear your concerns and want to clarify. The enhancements on some YouTube Shorts are from an experiment using traditional machine learning to improve video clarity, not Gen AI. YouTube's creator liaison Renee Ritchie wrote, no Gen AI, no upscaling. We're running an experiment on select YouTube Shorts that uses traditional machine learning to unblur, denoise, and improve clarity in video during processing, similar to what a modern smartphone does when you record a video. YouTube is always working on ways to provide the best video quality and experience possible, and will continue to take creator and viewer feedback into consideration as we iterate and improve on these features. However, for some, the explanation isn't good enough. Samuel Woolley, who is the chair of disinformation studies at the University of Pittsburgh, said, "You can make decisions about what you want your phone to do and whether to turn on certain features. What we have here is a company manipulating content from leading users that is then being distributed to a public audience without the consent of the people who produce the videos." Woolley also argued that the choice of words feels like, in his description, a misdirection. "I think using the term machine learning is an attempt to obscure the fact that they use AI because of concerns surrounding the technology." Now, the BBC points out that to some extent, this is just a new version of an old conversation. They write, 30 years ago, there was similar hand-wringing about the havoc Photoshop would reap on society. Decades later, we have conversations about the harms of airbrushing models in magazines and beauty filters on social media. Perhaps AI is more of the same, but it puts these trends on steroids. I don't think ultimately that this is in and of itself a huge deal. Even some of the creators that were quoted in these articles ultimately say, yeah, look, they're a company, they're trying to improve video quality, I get it. YouTube's been a good platform to me. But I do think that it brings up important questions around consent and control, classic questions of the relationship between platforms and their creators, and obviously exemplifies the fact that AI, despite its increasing ubiquity, is going to be a cultural battleground in some ways. Now, speaking of that, another company that has been wrestling with its approach to AI has been Netflix. You might remember back in July on an earnings call, Netflix CEO Ted Sarandos talked about how they had used Gen AI in one of their original programmings in the Argentina market. Sarandos said, "We remain convinced that AI represents an incredible opportunity to help creators make films and series better, not just cheaper. There are AI-powered creator tools, so this is real people doing real work with better tools. This year we had El Atenada. It's a very big hit show for us from Argentina. In that production, we leveraged virtual production and AI-powered VFX. And in fact, that VFX sequence was completed 10 times faster than it could have been completed with traditional VFX tools and workflows. And also, the cost of it would just not have been feasible for a show in that budget. So that sequence actually is the very first Gen AI final footage to appear on screen in a Netflix Inc. original series or film." At the time, we discussed the fact that Netflix was, one, clearly trying to say that they're not using AI tools to replace people. Instead, AI is a new toolset for their people. And two, that this isn't even just a cheaper way of doing something that would otherwise have been done with a more traditional process. This is an example of where, if it weren't for Gen AI, the entire sequence would have had to be scrapped because it would never have been in the budget in the first place. In other words, a total net additive force. Even before that, Netflix was no stranger to the AI conversation. Back in 2024, it got in a little bit of hot water when it was accused of using AI-generated images in a true crime documentary. Futurism's The Bite wrote, "Resorting to the tech to generate pictures of a real person, especially of somebody who's still in jail and will only be eligible for parole around 2040, should raise some alarm bells. This isn't inventing a fictional narrative for the sake of entertainment. This is tinkering with the fabric of reality itself to manipulate a true story that actually happened." Well, this week, the company tried to get out ahead of these types of issues by publishing a set of guidelines for Gen AI use in its content production. Posted to their partner Help Center, the piece is called Using Generative AI in Content Production and is meant as a resource for their partners. They write, "This guidance helps filmmakers, production partners, and vendors understand when and how to use Gen AI tools in production. It also offers a practical tool for assessing and enabling confident Gen AI use when producing content for Netflix." The company lists 5 guiding principles. The first, the outputs do not replicate or substantially recreate identifiable characteristics of unowned or copyrighted material or infringe any copyrighted protected works. 2, the generative tools do not store, reuse, or train on production data inputs or outputs. 3, where possible, generative tools are used in an enterprise-secured environment to safeguard inputs. 4, generated material is temporary and not part of the final deliverables. 5, Gen AI is not used to replace or generate new talent performances or union-covered work without consent. Basically, they say, if all 5 of those are met, quote, socializing the intended use with your Netflix contact may be sufficient, but if you answer no or unsure to any of them, you gotta go get written approval. It's clear that one of the big things that they're thinking about is some of those issues that we were just discussing in the context of YouTube. Netflix writes, "Audiences should be able to trust what they see and hear on screen. Gen AI, if used without care, can blur the line between fiction and reality or unintentionally mislead viewers." In that same post, they also share a use case matrix with a red light, yellow light, green light approach to help people understand some examples. An example of a full green light would be something like using Gen AI for ideation only, i.e. mood boards and reference images. The rationale for it not needing escalation is that it's low risk and non-final. For something where a company was using Gen AI to generate background elements like signage or posters that appear on camera, it's in that in-between category. They write incidental elements may be low risk, but if story relevant, please escalate. Meanwhile, the full red lights are things like using Gen AI to create final character designs or key visuals, or using Gen AI for talent replication, such as re-aging or synthetic voices. Now, importantly, Netflix isn't saying that those things are completely off the table. they're saying that they have to be reviewed and signed off on by Netflix, not just by a third-party production company. Now, to many, this is just incredibly common sense. Cristobal Valenzuela, the co-founder CEO of Runway, writes, "Really nice to see this public Netflix guide for using AI in content production. It makes it easier for their partners to understand how to adopt. This is the way." And in general, I think we're going to see a lot more of this. I would anticipate that in 2026, there are less debates around the ifs of AI and more focus on the hows, and frankly, I think that will be all to our benefit. But of course, in some ways, it still feels incredibly toe-dipping relative to what the ultimate impact of AI on entertainment is going to be. To get a preview of where that might be headed, check out the new company Showrunner. Variety describes it as a tool for user-directed TV shows, and basically the idea is exactly what it sounds like. You type in a few words, and you can create entire scenes or entire episodes of a TV show, either from scratch or based on an existing IP. It was created by Edward Sachi. Variety writes, "Sachi's hypothesis is that AI, instead of simply being a tool for cheaper special effects, represents a new entertainment medium, one that more closely resembles video games." He said, "Using AI purely as a VFX tool is a little sad," and continued, "The Toy Story of AI isn't just going to be a cheap Toy Story. Our idea is that Toy Story of AI would be playable with millions of new scenes all owned by Disney." Now, obviously with that vision, the company is in talks with all the IP holders and has investment from Amazon, among others. Whether it works remains to be seen. Even Sachi said maybe nobody wants this and it won't work. But I would expect a lot more experiments like this in the years to come. For now, that's going to do it for today's AI Daily Brief. Appreciate you listening or watching as always, and until next time, peace.